They know nothing, but they'll go out to the river even so. After the first party returned in terror, for all the urging of the elders, there was not a single man brave enough to join a further expedition. Then, as fortune would have it, here's this stranger come into the village seeking a night's shelter after his horse has hurt afoot. And though he knows nothing of this boy or his family before today, he's declared himself willing to come to the village's aid. Those others going out with him are two more of the boy's uncles, and by the look of them, I'd say they're more likely to hinder that warrior than to be of any help. Look, Axel, they're sick with fear. I see that right enough, Princess, but they're brave men all the same, to go out when they're so afraid. We choose a bad night to ask this village's hospitality. There's weeping somewhere even now, and there may be a great deal more before the night's past. The medicine woman seemed to understand something of what Axel had said, for she spoke again in her own language. Then Beatrice said, "She says to go straight to the old longhouse now, and not show ourselves again till morning. If we choose to wander the village, she says there's no telling how we may be greeted on a night like this." My own thoughts exactly, Princess. Then let's be taking the good lady's advice, if you can still remember the way. But just at that moment, the crowd made a sudden noise. Then the noise became cheering, and the crowd shifted again as if struggling to change shape. Then it began to move, the warrior and his two companions near its center. A low chanting started up, and soon the spectators in the shadows, the medicine woman included, joined in. The procession came towards them, and though the brightness of the fire had been left behind, several torches were moving within it so that Axel could catch glimpses of faces, some frightened, some excited. Whenever a torch illuminated the warrior, his expression was calm, gazing to the left and right to acknowledge words of encouragement, his hand once more on the handle of his sword. They went past Axel and Beatrice, continued between a row of huts, and out of view, though the muted chanting remained audible for some time. Perhaps daunted by the atmosphere, neither Axel nor Beatrice moved for a while. Then Beatrice began to question the medicine woman on the best way to reach the longhouse, and it seemed to Axel the two women were soon discussing directions to some other destination altogether, for they pointed and gestured in the distance toward the hills above the village. They finally set off for their lodgings only when quiet had descended over the village. It was harder than ever to find one's way in the darkness, and the occasional torches burning on corners seemed only to increase the confusion with their shadows. They were proceeding in the opposite direction to that which the crowd had gone, and the houses they had passed were dark with no obvious signs of life. "Walk slowly, Princess," Axel said softly. "If either of us takes a bad tumble on this ground, I'm not certain there'll be a soul coming out to help us." "Oh, Axel, I think we've lost our way again. Let's go back to the last corner, and this time I'll be sure to find it." In time the path straightened, and they found themselves walking beside the perimeter fence that they had seen from the hill. Its sharpened poles loomed above them in a shade darker than the night sky, and as they went on, Axel could hear murmured voices somewhere above them. Then he saw that they were no longer alone. High up along the ramparts, at regular intervals, were shapes he realized were people, gazing out over the fence into the dark wilderness beyond. He had barely time to share this observation with Beatrice before they heard footsteps gathering behind them. They quickened their pace, but now a torch was moving nearby and shadows swung rapidly before them. At first Axel thought that they had stumbled upon a group of villagers coming in another direction, but then saw that he and Beatrice were entirely surrounded. Saxon men of varying ages and builds, some with spears, others wielding hoes, scythes, and other tools, were jostling around them. Several voices addressed them at once, and even more people seemed to be arriving. Axel felt the heat of the torches thrust at their faces, and holding Beatrice close to him, tried to locate with his gaze the leader of this group, but could find no such figure. Every face, moreover, was filled with panic, and he realized any careless move could bring disaster. He pulled Beatrice out of the reach of a particularly wild-eyed young man who had raised a trembling knife in the air and searched his memory for some Saxon phrases. When nothing came to him, he made do with a few soothing noises, such as he might have done with an unruly horse. "Stop that, Axel," Beatrice whispered. "They won't thank you for singing lullabies to them." She addressed one, then another of the men in Saxon, but the mood did not improve. Shouted arguments were breaking out, and a dog tugging on a rope broke through the ranks to snarl at them. Then the tense figures around them seemed all at once to sag, their voices quieted, till there was only one shouting angrily, somewhere still a little way off. The voice came closer, and the crowd parted to let through a squat, misshapen man who shuffled into the pool of light, leaning on a thick staff. He was quite elderly, and though his back was relatively straight, his neck and head protruded from his shoulders at a grotesque angle. Nonetheless, all present appeared to yield to his authority. The dog, too, ceased barking and vanished into the shadows. Even with his limited Saxon, Axel could tell the misshapen man's fury had only partly to do with the villagers' treatment of strangers. They were being reprimanded for abandoning their sentry post, and the faces caught in the torchlight became crestfallen, though filled with confusion. Then, as the elder's voice rose to a new level of anger, the men seemed slowly to remember something, and one by one slipped back into the night. But even when the last of them had gone, and there were sounds of feet clambering up ladders, the misshapen man went on hurling insults after them. Finally he turned to Axel and Beatrice, and switching to their language, said with no trace of an accent, "How can it be that they forget even this, and so soon after watching the warrior leave with two of their own cousins to do what none of them had courage for? Is it shame makes their memories so weak, or simply fear?" "They're fearful right enough, Ivor," Beatrice said. "Just now a spider falling beside them could set them tearing at one another. A sorry crew you sent out to greet us." "My apologies, Mrs. Beatrice, and to you too, sir. It's not the welcome you would have usually gotten here, but as you see, you've arrived on a night filled with dread." "We've lost our way to the old longhouse, Ivor," Beatrice said. "If you'd point us to it, we'd be much beholden to you, especially after that greeting. My husband and I are eager to be indoors and resting." "I'd like to promise you a kind welcome at the longhouse, friends, but on this night, there's no telling what my neighbors may see fit to do. It'd be easier if you and your good husband agreed to spend the night under my roof, where I know you'll remain undisturbed." "We accept your kindness gladly, sir," Axel broke in. "My wife and I are much in need of rest." "Then follow me, my friends. Stay close behind me and keep your voices low till we arrive." They followed Ivor through the dark until they reached a house which, though in structure much like the others, was larger and stood apart by itself. When they entered under the low arch, the air was thick with wood smoke, which, even as it made Axel's chest tighten, felt warm and welcoming. The fire was smoldering in the center of the room, surrounded by woven rugs, animal skins, and furniture crafted from oak and ash. As Axel went about extricating blankets from their bundles, Beatrice sank gratefully into a rocking seat. Ivor, though, remained standing by the doorway, a preoccupied look on his face. "The treatment you received just now," he said, "I shudder with shame to think of it." "Please, let's think no more of it, sir," Axel said. "You've shown us more kindness than we could deserve, and we arrived this evening in time to see the brave men set off on their dangerous mission. So we understand all too well the dread that hangs in the air, and it's no wonder some should behave foolishly. If you strangers remember our troubles well enough, how is it those fools are forgetting them already? They were told in terms a child could understand to hold their positions on the fence at all costs, the safety of the whole community depending on it, to say nothing of the need to aid our heroes should they appear at the gates pursued by monsters. So what do? Two strangers go by, and remembering nothing of their orders or even reasons for them, they set on you like crazed wolves. I'd be doubting my own senses if such strange forgetfulness didn't occur so often in this place." "It's the same in our own country, sir," Axel said. "My wife and I have witnessed many incidents of such forgetfulness among our own neighbors."